episode 138. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Alexa's Publishing Chat. This episode was so incredibly interesting and fun and eye-opening, and I don't think the title gives it justice to everything that Angela and I covered. Not only did we talk about the importance of finding a publisher that's aligned with your mission, especially if you're trying to make a splash and a bigger impact on social justice, but we talked about finding a publisher that supports BIPOC writers and feminist and queer writers, that looks at publishing books through the lens of feminism and intersectionalism and empowering those groups. But we also talked about fun book marketing tactics around launching these types of books, and her cool journey that she's been on doing this traveling book publicity tour all over the place. I mean, we had a blast. I loved this interview. I think you're going to love Angela and her mission, and I hope you enjoy the show. So if you're not already on our email list, please make sure you go over to womeninpublishingsummit.com. You'll find a newsletter, sign up. You can also go to our events page and register for any of our events that will get you on our newsletter list. But we're really doing big things, great things, and having a blast along the way. So we've got in our October will be our kickoff of the 2025 Women in Publishing Summit year. So we start our conference session in October, and we're really excited about that. October 10th, I believe, is the date. Save the date. Check out the events page when we'll be doing our kickoff for 2025. So we are thrilled to be getting ready to announce all the wonderful things that are going to be happening for the next year. So make sure you head over that way, womeninpublishingsummit.com, and grab all the information that you need about all the things that are up and coming. All right, enjoy the show. Welcome to the podcast, a place where you can come to get inspiration, motivation, help, encouragement, and support in your journey to write, publish, and sell your book. Hosted by Alexa Bigwarfe. 'Cause I've been where you've been, and I felt what you're feeling, and I don't want to get in your way. Welcome to another episode of Alexa's Publishing Chat. Today we're going to be talking about a variety of topics, but largely about finding the right mission-aligned publisher, looking for a publisher who has your interests in mind, in particular for feminist and queer writers and BIPOC writers. We are talking about social justice and activism in writing. So we're really covering some big topics today. My guest is Dr. Angela Yarber, and she is an award-winning author of 8 books herself and the founder of Tehom Center Publishing, an imprint publishing for feminist and queer authors with a commitment to elevate BIPOC writers. In addition to traditional independent publishing at no cost to authors, Tehom Center Publishing also offers one-to-one and group coaching aimed at empowering authors in their book writing, book marketing, and authorpreneurship. Dr. Yarber holds a PhD in art and religion from UC Berkeley, and her work has been featured in Forbes, NPR, Huffington Post, HuffPo, Ms. Magazine, The Independent, and the television show Tiny House Nation. And you can learn more about Tehom Publishing at Tehom, which is spelled TEHOM, center.org, and that link will be in the show notes, which you can find either in whatever platform you're listening to this podcast in, or you can go over to womeninpublishingsummit.com/podcast and look for this episode. So Angela, thank you so much. This is quite a full agenda we have today in this episode. I'm so glad you're here with us.
I am so glad to be here. It's great to be talking with you.
Well, all right, let's dig right into it. And first of all, the question that I love to ask people, especially people who have done such big things and started publishing houses and doing all of this, is how did you start all of this stuff? How did you get involved in this lane of the publishing world?
I love that question. And my answer is a little circuitous, but I'm going to try to focus it a bit. So I came into being a publisher after having 8 books of my own published with 4 different publishing houses. My background is I'm an academic, so the majority of my first, 5 or 6 books were with academic and nonprofit publishers, and they were all lovely. I didn't have any bad or negative experiences. And also, I found that most of them and most of the publishing companies that folks that I knew worked with didn't really quite get the nuances of what it means to be a queer or feminist writer. And especially if you bring in like social justice, anti-racism work, and spirituality, it kind of boggles the mind of a lot of folks. And so they didn't really know how to market us. And I didn't know how to market it because most authors are writers, right? We aren't marketers. And so I was thinking about that and then learning about some of the statistics in publishing that only 16% of published authors identify as LGBTQIA. Even worse, only 11% are BIPOC. And I thought, geez, like these are the stories and the books that we need, that the world needs the most, and we're not getting to hear them.
Yeah.
So I thought, I want to be inspired by one of my ancestors. I'm a Mexican-American woman, and Gloria Anzaldúa is one of my queer Chicana feminist ancestors. And she says that the world I create in my writing compensates for what the real world does not give me. And I thought, like, not all publishing companies, I'm not saying this to throw publishing companies under the bus, right? But so many of them are led by straight white men in power, and who hire and buy books written by other people like them. And so I thought, let's have a publishing company that's written by marginalized folks for marginalized folks, and who gets the nuances of what it means to market us, and that isn't predatory, that we publish at no cost to authors. And then if you need some coaching along the way to either help you write, help you market, help you be an entrepreneur, we can provide that with equitable prices. So I hope that's the short answer to your question.
Oh, that was a great answer, and I can feel your passion behind it. So that's really wonderful. And to your point on, like, I think that's where a lot of really great companies, products, where entrepreneurship really is the most beautiful answer to so many things, is that people who are struggling with their own situation create a solution to that for themselves and for other people who have the same challenge. So I think that's really great. Now, how long have you been in business with Tehom Publishing?
That's an interesting question, because Tehom Center in and of itself has been a nonprofit for almost 8 years now, but we didn't pivot to publishing until almost 1.5 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So this is pretty new for us, but we are, by the end of this year, we'll have about 25 books out.
That's fantastic.
About maybe 50 authors in the queue. So it's, I'm really thrilled with it. It's been really, really enlivening. And as a bit of a side note, it's interesting because of my background as an academic, but also this might surprise folks as a queer woman myself. I also was a pastor for 15 years. I'm no longer practicing that tradition, but this has been a really interesting way of saying, like, oh, I'm living into my calling right now, of like lifting up the voices of those who are marginalized in a way that if someone had told me when I was ordained over 20 years ago that I would be running a publishing company, I think I would have raised my eyebrows and thought, what on earth are you talking about? But it's really been this affirmation of saying, hey, I'm helping the world be a better place by the way.
Well, clearly your message is resonating. If you've already published 25 and have 50 in the queue after 1.5 years, I mean, kudos to you. That's
thank you.
That's amazing. And you know what? To all of our publishers in the audience who are listening, I hope that the message that you take from this is how important it is to niche down. I mean, obviously you have a very important message in what you're doing, but I think that a lot of times new publishing houses struggle because they try to answer the call to publishing everything. Absolutely. Instead of really getting really niched down in that one area. And back to what you were saying about marketing before, and I saw this as a publisher myself, is that when we were in the grief inspiration, self-help, and entrepreneurship space, like we knew exactly what to do with that. And then we tried to add in fiction and we were like, oh, this is totally different. And we don't have the connections. We don't have the, all this stuff. And then we did children's books and we're like, oh my gosh, this is like an alien from another thing. So like, when you try to like expand too fast, it's really hard. So just publishers, niche down, look at and have them, and like we tell authors with marketing too, is that when you know your target audience and you're passionate and you know how to speak to them, you can pull them in the right way, and you're a testament to that. You have a very clear audience, a clear mission, and I think that's probably just resonating so well with the people. Plus they're underrepresented, so they're like, oh, thank you, finally somebody's out there to represent our voices. So sorry, got a little excited there, but I know exactly what you're talking about too, with saying like 20 years ago I was doing counterterrorism and homeland security. I would have never thought I'd be running the Women in Publishing Summit and doing a podcast and publishing books. Like, but sometimes our calling takes us down a different way. Anyway,
Absolutely.
got
And
real
I
excited
love,
there for a minute.
well, I love that. And I love the idea of niching down. And sometimes we're worried about that, especially as entrepreneurs, because we're like, oh, I don't want to leave anyone out, or, this is for everyone.
Right.
Of course it's for everyone. We know that. And I think for me, that's where a lot of times collaboration and partnerships can come in. That
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I have some books come in that I'm like, this sounds really awesome. It should be published. It's just not for me. So let me direct you to my friend over at such and such, because this deserves to be published. It's just not the right fit for us.
Right.
And I know both as an author and a publisher, that's, I've had two books actually get published that way of my own, where someone heard it and said, this is amazing. We don't know how to market this, but do you know who does? And they sent
Exactly.
that connection email, and it made such a big difference about just having the perspective of collaboration rather than competition.
You know what? And that's something, we're going down a rabbit hole here, and we'll come back to our topic at hand here. But I think this is important. And since we have such a wide audience of people from authors all the way through publishing professionals, I think it's interesting to dig down a little bit here. That's something as a new publisher that I didn't know and understand. Not the collaboration. I've always been a person who wants to collaborate with, but I didn't understand that value of having other publishers to collaborate with and be like, this isn't a good fit for us, but I'd like to send it to you. And that's something I didn't learn until a couple years in, because I wanted to take, as I was growing my business, I wanted to take every good book that came my way.
Right.
But I have since then really started to collaborate with other publishers. When I'm not publishing books anymore anyway, except for through our children's book company, but it's so much better for everybody. And I will say it's a disservice to the author to take on a book that you don't know how to publish or market or position correctly. And I think for authors out there, one of the best things you can do, especially if you're looking at a small traditional press or a small hybrid, is look at their catalog and make sure that your book fits in really well with everything else that they've published. But yeah, and this is wonderful for me, because one of our biggest missions of the Women in Publishing Summit is to uplift all women's voices, of course, but to uplift the marginalized voices too. And sadly, I don't have a lot of publishers who are in this. So now I'm so glad to have you to send folks to be like, check out this company. So anyway, all right. So that was our little sidetrack there. Now let's get back into what we are talking about here, which is, I mean, all of these beautiful topics, right? So let's talk about writing, editing, and marketing book through the intersectionally feminist lens, because I think that's kind of, and then we'll get into more of the publishing and how people can publish with you and all those types of things, and social justice, and oh my goodness, we're going to be talking forever. So what is the importance of the intersectionally feminist lens? How does that impact the writing and editing portion and marketing of a book?
Right. I love that question. And I think to start, kind of for me to give credit where credit is due, that the whole idea of intersectional feminism or intersectionality is really because of Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined this phrase. I think it was maybe even the late 90s, but a Black attorney who talks about how feminism, and even this is true, I think, with the work that you're doing here at Women in Publishing, right? That it's not just about gender, but it's also about sexuality and race and ability and all those other isms used to exclude and divide. And that if it's just lifting up one type of woman, then it's not true feminism, right? And so for me, I have to be really honest, especially about the marketing side of things. For me, it wasn't until maybe 2 years ago that I could even use the phrase marketing without like bursting into hives because in my mind, I had this ridiculous stereotype that I thought that all marketing was like this ridiculous, sleazy used car salesman who's trying to like hoodwink people and trick them into
Yeah.
buying something that's not worth anything. And I remember a friend of mine talking with me, not even about my writing, it was about my work as a visual artist. And she was like, honey, your work is transformative and it changes lives. And so why wouldn't you want to share that with as many people as possible? Like you're doing
Mm-hmm.
them a disservice by not
Mm-hmm.
sharing it. And that caused a little bit of a shift in me to start learning about marketing through the lens of intersectional feminism, right? That it doesn't all have to be this like bro marketing of like find those pain points and poke them till it hurts and then buy it. But
Sell,
instead,
sell, sell,
right,
sell.
right. Well, and especially, as someone who's worked in like self-help and, kind of like these liberatory messages of books that change and transform your lives, that, it's not just about getting the $22 for the
Right.
book, but it's about creating this transformation. And people can't have the transformation if they don't hear about it.
Exactly.
To buy it, right? So that's a lot of like the book marketing coaching that I do is to help people, especially activists who sometimes cringe at even a conversation about money, let alone marketing, to
Yeah.
say you're actually doing your message a disservice by not spreading it to as many people in your niche audience as possible.
Yes. You know what? I'm so glad that you brought up this point. And marketing is a pain point while we're using
Mm.
that buzzword for a lot of authors and publishers. But I had a business coach, Renee Rebar. I still reach back out to her for help and support sometimes. She's one of the best coaches I've ever worked with. But sales is her area of expertise. And she said something very similar to me one time because I was feeling so icky when I first started ramping up the Women in Publishing Summit, when we made the transition from it being a free summit to a paid conference. Like that was terrifying for me.
Mm.
And I was like, I don't know how to market this. I feel gross about just blah blah blah. She said almost something very similar to me. She said, you are creating an event that changes people's lives. People have told you it has changed their lives. People learn so much and do this thing. Same to the authors who have books with transformational messages. And she said something very similar. She said, you're doing them a disservice if they don't know about this conference. If anybody wants to unsubscribe because they don't want to hear about it, that's fine. They're not your people. And I think that had the same kind of transformation for me as your friend saying that is really wrapping our head. And I repeat almost an identical story because, we need to hear things more than once before it soaks in, right? But it's so true. Like if you can, and if you've written a children's book or a fiction book or something, and you're like, well, that doesn't really resonate with me. I'm not writing a social justice book, or I don't have a message it doesn't matter. Like there's a reason people want those books for whatever reason, and they're looking for them. So tell them about them, and you don't have to do it in a gross way, but in a way that, so when I have people that are scared about marketing, I say, throw out everything you know about what marketing is and just think about it as a relationship with people and about sharing something with someone, just like you would if one of your friends posted on Facebook, I'm looking for a book about dealing with my Hashimoto's, or about how to be a better ally to this community, or about how to whatever it is, start a publishing house, or great summer reads or beach reads or whatever. Just like you would for other people's books, you'd say, oh my gosh, I read this book and I love it. That's how you talk to people about your book too. So, anyway, it's really important when it comes to the topics like you're talking about with it, where it's like we're talking life changing, really. So the first of all, for people who don't know and understand what we're talking about of books on social justice and activism, you want to explain a little bit about the field that we're talking about there?
Sure. So a lot of it really comes back to that notion of intersectionality, of saying that there are different ways that all of us live and occupy space in the world. And some of those parts of our identities, so for myself as a queer Mexican American woman, those are all parts of my identity that experience oppression in the world. Simultaneously, I'm white passing, which means I appear as white in the world. I have thin privilege. I've had the access to an abundance of higher education. So
Mhm.
those are all things that privilege me in the world. And so talking about those things, but it's interesting because even though you mentioned like, oh, maybe you've written a fiction book or maybe a children's book, for me, those are a big part of activism too, because having
Yeah.
joy, having rest, being able to sit on the beach with sand on your toes and hear the ocean and read a book that just delights you, like for me, that is a part of social justice too. It doesn't all have to be like, let me hold this protest sign or yell about something, but it's also about nourishing the self so that you can then nourish and give back to the world.
I
And if
love
that
that
means,
perspective.
if that means reading a good travel memoir, for me, that's my go-to space for joy is travel memoir. If it means doing that in a hammock, then by all means, like do that. That is part of being an activist too, I think, in the world.
That's, you know, that whole idea of taking care of yourself so that you can pour more into others. I think that's an important piece of it as well. So how then, okay, so let's talk about who you're looking for specifically.
Okay.
Are your books mostly the types of stories that are more revolutionary women and changing the world, or also non-binary kindred? Who are you looking for and mostly publishing?
I would say a lot of it comes down to like identity. And so the bulk of our writers are women and or non-binary. A lot of our writers are BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, people of color. A lot of our writers identify as queer, but not all of them. And so for me, it's not necessarily about like, if you don't check off these 3 boxes, don't even submit. I don't mean that, but I mean, if your values align with uplifting women, uplifting queer folks, uplifting anti-racism work, then you are a great fit. And I have to be honest in saying like, because we have that umbrella, then when it comes
Mhm.
to genre, we're pretty broad right now. It might be that in time we'll narrow a bit, but we've had some really amazing novels come out, some books of poetry, 1 or 2 children's books, and then a lot of nonfiction.
Uh-huh.
So while we do lean a bit more in the nonfiction realm, we have had some folks just write some really interesting, fascinating, gripping novels that I think maybe at first glance I wouldn't have thought, but then the more I dug into them, I'm like, wow, this raises so many brilliant issues that
Yeah.
doing it in a nonfiction book, it wouldn't bring them up in the same way.
Oh my gosh, I'm looking at your website right now. And first of all, there's some books out there I think we would all want to check out and support. But I mean, you've got everything from one about traveling life to cultivating compassion, Panic Eyes, a novel. So novels, I mean, there's just, first of all, I love, you've got some great covers in here.
Oh,
Love
thank
is the
you.
why. I mean, this is a fun collection. Like you said, it's kind of a melting pot of messages in here, but looks like some great books in here.
Oh, thank you. I'll have to
So
tell you one that stands out to me that just came out last month.
yes.
And we launched it interestingly. So right now I'm on a 10-week Pride book tour for my own book, Queering the American
Nice.
Dream. But one of the first events that I did on the tour was in Atlanta with Miss Terracotta Sugarbaker, who is the Atlanta drag queen who started Drag Queen Story Hour. And
Oh
so
my.
she made this picture book called Affirmations, Affirmations to Slay Your Day the Sugarbaker Way. And like each
Ah!
page is a different amazing photo of her with just like a pithy, inspirational affirmation. So kind of like children's book meets coffee table book, you know?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so we just had this amazing event together. But that's not something when I originally started a publishing company that I thought I would necessarily be doing books like that.
Yeah.
But it kind of bubbled up. And I was like, of course, I'm going to take this opportunity to support Miss Terracotta Sugarbaker. So you just kind of never know what kind of books people need in the moment. And sometimes it's that beach read, like you talked about. Sometimes it's something that by the end of it, you're like galvanized to go make a change in the world. And sometimes it's a little book with photos and great affirmations that you can read one to start your day and you just hold your head a little bit higher.
So you're publishing this book.
Yes, it came out in June.
Oh, wonderful. I don't see that one on your website, so make sure you get
Oh
that
no.
updated.
Okay, thank you.
So also, I just want to make a point here at how important it is I told you when we started this, we could talk about so many things, but you're bringing up things that kind of weave all of this stuff together. Speaking of intersectionality, the intersectionality of being an author and all the different things that,
Yes.
right? No, the importance of getting out and meeting people and being at events. And I know a
Yes.
lot of authors are really scared of these types of things, but those connections that you make in person lead often to so many other things. I mean, you wouldn't have met her, you wouldn't have had the book, you wouldn't have had all these things.
Mhm.
And to totally segue off of something I hadn't planned on asking you about, um, speaking of book tours, like that's something I have personally never done. Can you talk a little bit about how you set that up and how you got the places where you went and involved in the
Mhm.
situations that you were involved in? Because I think that's important for authors to know.
Absolutely. So I think that this relates some to being an entrepreneur too, because let's
Hmm.
be honest, these days, unless you are maybe Brene Brown, Glennon Doyle, typically publishers are not going to throw out thousands upon thousands of
Right.
dollars for you to travel all over. And here I've been for 10 weeks with my whole family. So my wife and two children have been with me.
Wow.
We have not paid one penny for lodging. And the
Wow.
way we have done this
Do
is
tell.
that yeah, so this is like a little bit tangential, but I'm a big fan of this. So but I participate in a program called Home Exchange, and basically what I did was
Oh,
I found all of these events all over the country, and we've traded houses with people. So people are staying at our home and we're staying in their homes, and partnering where, you know, my events have been everything from, you know, bookstores and libraries, which is pretty traditional,
right.
to drag queen story hour, to this lesbian pop-up bar, to a variety of, hold your breath for this, churches that are like, why don't you come and preach about your topic? And then we have a book event afterwards. And so it's really been this wide variety. I did one for women entrepreneurs. And it
Wow.
was about, I think, like 180 women gathered together to talk about how writing and publishing can help your entrepreneurial work. So these weren't people who were writers per se, but
Right.
learning about how writing a book or even writing an essay and getting it published can really help develop your brand and help your business. And so thinking about the different angles you can approach with your book,
Absolutely.
because I never would have thought from the outset that a book called Queering the American Dream, that recounts my family's travels in a camper around the US after our marriage was dubbed legal, would bring me to like a women's entrepreneur event. But it kind of was the story to starting my publishing company. And so it made complete
Absolutely.
sense.
You know,
Um,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, you go right ahead.
No, I was just going to say that that's really something I've been thinking about a lot recently as we gear up for our marketing conference and thinking about what really makes the difference between the authors that I see doing really well and the ones who just aren't, because there seems to
Mm-hmm.
be like there's some people in the middle, but there seems to be like this wide chasm, right? Somebody who's
Yes.
selling lots of books and doing really well, or no, or they're not selling anything at all, right? Or very little. And I really do think that a big piece of that is the ability to think of this as a business, which is why we spend so
Mm-hmm.
much time talking about the author entrepreneur and that kind of stuff. And thinking outside the box, like not being
Right.
limited. Your book tour, when you said you were doing a book tour, I expected a kind of like this response. Well, I contacted this bookstore and then I didn't expect all of these other things, going to
Mm-hmm.
churches, going to these types of events, doing that. And it really is like, and having the home exchange, that's awesome. So it really is like thinking about different ways that you can capitalize on it. And I have a question that I hope I phrase this in a completely non-offensive way. So please bear with me as I think about how to phrase this.
Gotcha.
Do you feel that the nature of your topic it perhaps aided you in getting some events? I hope that came out right. Do you like
I think so.
you
Well,
with June
I
being
think if
Pride
you're,
Month and like
yes,
I guess what I'm trying to ask is right place, right time, capitalizing, no matter what your topic is,
yep,
capitalizing on the things that you can to make it bigger.
absolutely. And I think for me, that's part of this kind of like intersectional marketing lens
Yeah.
too, is to say, for me, you know, I'm a queer person and Pride is the, you know, so I intentionally, we chose June 1st as the publication date.
Right.
right? And
Right.
that means getting media coverage, getting articles about it, reviews. Those are going to be easier
Right.
to do it then. So, and I've launched other books of mine that are about women's history during Women's History Month.
Right.
And, for some people, there's not a direct correlation, but sometimes it's fun to sit down and brainstorm. Okay, what are all the things that happen every year that could relate to my book? And it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be tour related, but it could be about writing a companion essay on, say you're writing about grief.
Mm-hmm.
When does grief bubble up a lot? Around the holidays.
Right.
So here are 5 different angles that you could take to write a companion essay that deal with grappling with the grief you talk about in your book around the holidays, for example. And I think that that just makes sense for folks. And then your book still exists the rest of the year and the rest of the time. But if you're really going to try to do this big push, trying to have that align with something else that's happening in the world, I think that just makes sense.
That's a great idea. And I think everybody should Google whatever their topic is, plus special holidays or
Right.
commemoration days or months of
Mm-hmm.
awareness months, anything like that, because you'd be surprised. There's a lot of stuff out there on almost every topic that you can build stuff around. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I love the idea of the companion essays and submitting them to different publications, or even blogging about it on your own blog if
Yeah,
you can't find some
absolutely.
place to submit. Did you find it difficult to get events at the libraries and bookstores?
I not incredibly difficult. I mean, I'll be honest in saying that I would say 75% of the things that I set up, I had some kind of point of contact
Mm-hmm.
already established. But a lot of times people would maybe immediately think, oh, well, you must be well connected or something to do that. But when you really sit down and think about it, like, who knows what that person who was your chemistry partner your junior year in high school, who happens to run this business that's exactly like what you're doing and lives in Chicago and would love to host you. That's a very tangential or, kind of silly example, but people have a wider network than they think,
Yeah.
especially when you think about social media. And so some of it was, I started planning it. And then for my own family, we plan on doing a cross country move in a year. And so we said, let's really focus on the East Coast so we
Mm-hmm.
can be doing East Coast things before we move from the East Coast. So that narrowed it down a bit. And then there were a few where I just kind of put out social media all calls for friends and said, hey, I've got a great event in New York City and then another great event in Boston. Anyone in between those two spots? And who knew, someone at Yale and at Providence reached out. And
Wow.
there were people that I knew, but that I forgot lived in those places.
You're right.
And so, you never really know I kind of think like if you get 2 or 3 anchor events and then ask folks.
Yeah.
And I was actually inspired to do this by one of our authors, our very first author. Shout out to Kate Evans, who won the Best Bisexual Book Award. Her book with us, Wanderland, is about her traveling full time all over the world. It's a great book. But she did something that her partner dubbed the Goddess Tour, because basically she lives in Mexico now and then is nomad for half the year. Basically, like, I don't know, 8 to 10 of her friends that lived all over the US said, oh, I'd love to coordinate an event with you,
Oh my gosh.
at my local library. Or someone is a musician and they're like, hey, we're going to have a jam night. How about it's jam and books? And then one friend said, I'll host something at my house and invite my book group of 20 people. And so she just kind of bopped around, stayed with friends, did these events where, some were an intimate group of 8 and some were a couple hundred.
Yeah.
And I love that approach of saying it doesn't have to be limited. I want to support my local bookstore, hear that clearly. But you don't have to just be limited to your local bookstore. In fact, I'm on my soapbox now. I was just talking with a client today before this meeting with you, Alexa, and she was talking about how her book is pre-orderable, comes out next month, and it's a poetry collection. And she's like, you're not going to believe this. My hairstylist ordered my book, pre-ordered it, and I'm so excited. And we got to talking about it. And this is a queer woman poet. And the place where she gets her hair done is entirely queer run
Uh-huh.
salon. And I said, what about the idea of a pampering and poetry night?
Oh,
And so
fun.
she's reaching out to the salon to see if they can collaborate, because that's good marketing business for them and for
Absolutely.
her book. And, you know, some other people can come and maybe share their poems. And so there's just so many different creative ways to approach it that I think for readers and participants, like some folks, the idea of going to a book launch at a bookstore is a little intimidating, actually.
Yeah.
But, you know, like if you get to, I don't know, get a blowout on your hair and your nails done while listening to some awesome poetry and supporting a friend, like that sounds pretty lovely.
Now, I'm going to say something that's very controversial, and I apologize to anyone in our audience who does not drink for good reasons. But I will
Mhm.
say that if alcohol is involved, sales tend to be better. So even if it's only a
True.
glass or two of champagne that you're providing for people, yes, we'll just leave it at that. If you want to have dry events, I fully support that. And by no means am encouraging everyone to be drinking all the time. Just thought I'd throw that out there.
I love that. And, you know, I've had a couple clients who, and even one of my books, I've done this where they've had a bartender create a signature cocktail
Oh my gosh, that's so fun.
or a signature tea blend. So you can have sober events too, you know, so like I love for me to ignite as many different senses as possible with your book. And so, whether it's, you know, one of our artists, you mentioned her Compassionate Creativity book, she is an artist too. And so her opening event, artwork was everywhere. There was the book. And then she had a friend who was launching a new restaurant and they had like a tasting menu that corresponded with different chapters.
Oh, I love that. Oh my
Doesn't that
gosh.
sound delicious and amazing? And then for the rest of their lives, when people taste that whatever blend it is of spices, they're going to think of your book. And like how cool and lovely is that?
Oh my gosh, that gives me a fun idea because my book, my first novel is set in Paris. So, you know, having some of the things that I talk about on that in that book for food, I'm gonna have to incorporate more food into the second book so that I can really go hard on this on this theme of
Exactly.
matching food with my books. I
I'm
like
going to have to
food.
prop up my feet with your novel and a box of macaroons, and I will be a very happy person.
There you go. Although I don't know how I feel about you using my book as a foot prop, but
Oh no, I mean I'd prop my feet up as I'm reading your book.
oh,
I just
oh, Angela. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Totally. Wow. So how easily things can be misinterpreted, right?
yes, yes.
But hey, if you buy the book, actually, I don't care what you do with it after that point in time.
No, I would read it and prop my foot on my ottoman.
Oh my gosh. Well, let me tell you, I had no intention of us going down the road of talking about food and teas and signature cocktails and marketing, but what a fun conversation and what great ideas in there. Um, so our final question then is going to be, let's get back to the topic of finding the right publisher for you, especially if you are, really looking for a missionally aligned publisher. So for you all, it's the feminist and queer with commitment to the BIPOC writers. But I think in general, do you have tips for your organization as well, and for other authors who are looking for that alignment? What to look for, what questions to ask, what things
Mhm.
to review, all those things.
I love that that's our final question. And I think you alluded to it earlier when you talked about, you know, look at the website and what other books they've published. And would your book belong on a shelf around some of those books? Does it look like they're championing other authors like you? Would you be the only one like you? And if so, does the publishing company have the capacity to really champion your book the way that you want it to be championed? And I don't want to imply that if they have nothing like you, that they can't do that, right?
Right.
But to be able to have that conversation and to say, hey, I've noticed that, you know, you've published, I don't know, 18 mystery novels in the last 2 years, and they're all written by men. What about, do you have any mystery novelists who are women? So just to think about what it is that you in particular value, and also what your identity is. And especially when you think about what parts of yourself are marginalized in the publishing industry, to see if someone's, you know, truly going to be behind you and your book, or if they're going to ask you maybe in the editing process to compromise things that are important to you because they wouldn't understand it, because they don't understand your marginality.
Right.
Um, and I think even before you go into looking for folks, making a list of what it is that's most important and valuable to you so that you can refer to it. Because if you're anything like me, like especially when I was first getting published, it was just like, oh, someone wants to publish me. And so it didn't matter what anything else
Right.
was. I just wanted to
Right.
get out there. And so sometimes you can almost fool yourself into thinking that it doesn't
Hmm.
matter. But if something like really, really beautiful covers matters to you, then you're going to want to find a publisher that makes really beautiful covers.
Right.
If a lot of emotional support along the way matters to you, then that's what you need to look for. So to know kind of what your values are going in, whether it's about, mission and marginality, whether it's about the aesthetics, that, whatever it is, to know that so that you don't lose yourself or sign a contract and then get disappointed partway in.
I agree with you so much. And just to piggyback on this, one of the things I get asked a lot of questions because, there are all types of publishing models. And I'm not here to tell you which one is the right one for you or, all the things. But what I can say is that there's one major red flag that pops up to me no matter how you're publishing, whether it's through a self-publishing assist or boutique, traditional, hybrid, whatever, whatever. And that is pressure sales and saying like, if you don't sign this contract by tomorrow, this deal will not be good. You won't be, I mean, there is a time, you and I both know as publishers, there is a time frame. We can't continue having conversations with people for a year and a half because we have slots that we need to fill and a production schedule and all of that kind of stuff. But I think that what I tell people is that publishing, unless you're going with the big five where it will not be personal, you'll go through an agent and the agent will be your person, not the publisher. But in smaller houses, it's a personal relationship. I mean, you are going into a contract that is almost as serious, if not more than marriage. Like you need to make sure that you like the company, that you feel good with the company, that you can talk to them. And so I know when we have people, and I'm sure it's the same with you, I'm more than happy to answer questions and to get on the phone and to explain things and to do those types of things because I know from my perspective, it's important for me to be working with people that I can fully support, represent, do all of those things. And I want it to be a two-way street too. So just to, where you said it's important to take the time to understand your publisher and how they're working with you. And like you said, can I have a phone conversation with this person or their representative? You may not always be talking to the publisher, but someone in the company. And I'm sure, especially when you get down into the super niche categories where you're doing a specific mission alignment or representing voices that you really want to get out, I think that matters even more.
Absolutely. And something that has been a learning curve for me, we were talking a little bit about when you first got started, what we had to learn. As someone who's only a year and a half into this, I realized like the more, like, even though I think I'm so clear and I'm like, it's on the website, it's in your contract, it's this and this.
Right.
Sometimes, people need to hear it 6 or 7 times. So
Right.
I've gotten into the habit now where if people are even expressing interest, I share a sample contract and I share a document with our standard operating procedures.
Oh,
Because
that's
I'm like,
awesome.
you need to know going in that this is what we do so that you don't sign and then say, what do you mean it takes 3 months
Right.
before my advanced reader copy arrives, or whatever it might be,
Right.
so that they know going in what to expect. Because I've had some learning curves along the way for me and my authors who came in thinking, oh, I'm going to get this, this, this. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that might be what they gave on that TV show that you watched about publishing. That is not really how the publishing world works.
You are not getting a $600,000 advance, and I am not paying for you to have a publicist and to take you to all the major bookstores all the way up and down the East Coast. It's wow. It's fun in the movies, though, isn't it wonderful?
It is. It is.
Oh my gosh. Well, this conversation has been truly, I told you at the beginning, it's conversational. We go where the conversation takes us, and boy, did we. But
oh my goodness.
What is your submissions process?
It is all on our website, which gets to how to find us, right? tehomcenter.org, TEHOM center.org. And it's on our homepage. You just scroll down and there's a form that basically asks for a brief summary about your book, links to any websites, writing, your social media, so we kind of know what your presence is in the world, along with an outline and who your intended audience is. So it's not the most basic, because sometimes people just want like a super short thing,
Right.
but it's between the super short and the tediously long. It's an in-between.
Enough for you to make a good decision on a book without making people spend 72 hours creating their query letter and
Yes,
documents.
absolutely.
I got it. And one last question, and that is there there must be a significance to the name Tehom. That's
There
an
is, yes.
interesting word.
So Tehom is the Hebrew word for depth, but it has a little bit of from the depths of chaos, the watery depths of chaos. And from that comes creativity and creation.
Oh, I love that.
And so, yeah, so I'm a bit of an etymology nerd and spent probably 6 years doing a lot of Hebrew translation work. And yeah, and it also has these beautiful like goddess imagery and queer imagery all embedded in this word that I won't dive into. But since that's what kind of company we are, and since we're digging into the depths of who we are with our writing, that's why we chose that.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I should have asked that at the beginning, but hey, it's the last thing that people will remember.
I love it.
TehomCenter.org. This has been so much fun, Angela. I hope we have many more opportunities to collaborate in the future.
Me too. Good luck with all that you are doing, and thanks for the goodness that you're putting out into the world.
And same to you. Thank you.
You don't have to give me your heart. You don't have to give it away.
Thank you for joining us on the podcast. We hope to see you back for the next episode. Great, huge thanks goes to Jasmine Commerce for the use of her song. You can find Jasmine on SoundCloud. Go check out all of her music. We'll see you next time.